Hello, 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 everybody.
Hello.
Welcome again to another episode of Beyond a Thought podcast, where we're talking about issues you're probably thinking about. My name is Lynette.
And my name is Z.
Welcome again.
Welcome.
So today,
Actually, before we say anything, if you have children around you, you might want to put earphones in or tell them to go. We are not responsible. We are not held liable for your children learning things that they shouldn't be learning.
At the age that they are.
Exactly. Okay?
Or they may be.
If they're teenagers, then sure, I guess. Maybe not. Actually, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, 18, 19. They're teenagers. Fair. Anyway, today, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the sex.
Sex.
Z likes to call it the sex.
The sex.
Sex.
Let's talk about the sex, baby.
Let's talk about you and me.
Let's talk about all the good things. Yeah, baby. Not the bad things. Because sex is beautiful.
Yes.
So there's nothing bad about it.
So today we're going to take a different angle than we have in previous episodes. We have talked about the sex before here. If you haven't listened to any of those, it's there. It's available.
Yep.
To listen to wherever you listen to it. Go check it out. So yeah.
Today,
go?
Today we're going there. We're going to talk about relatively controversial, I guess, in the Christian circle. The pros and cons to abstinence before marriage. So somebody may be asking, con, if you're not a Christian and you don't subscribe to the abstinence concept, then there are cons. But in our Christian circles, there are no cons to abstinence because the Bible tells us not to. Well, it doesn't say explicitly don't have sex before marriage.
It advises against it.
It advises to keep yourself free from sexually immoral things prior to marriage because sex is supposed to be between a husband and a wife, right? So that is the premise that we're going off of today. So we do recognize that there's some people that definitely may not agree with anything that we're saying.
Right.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah.
We live in a free world, I guess, free country, Canada. They say freedom of speech in this country. So we are exercising that right to talk freely.
But I think, again, we always mention it on this podcast that, one, these are conversation starters for things that we think of and we've just kind of put in a box and think of it a certain way. And we have no other conversations about it. And we have no other opinions about it. We just take it as it is. And some of the things that we even think of are not necessarily explicit like that in the Bible. Or God doesn't say it in that way. So instead of studying what the Lord has to say about it, it's just like, oh, this is like, we made our rhetoric around it and we made it law. So here we like to talk and piece apart those things and talk about open it up to have conversations about it so that it doesn't seem as if there's only this tunnel vision of having of thinking about it, but to have concrete conversations about it.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about pros and cons to abstinence, first of all, the definition of abstinence is just abstaining or withholding from sex up until a certain point. And in Christian circles, that certain point is the day of your wedding, where you are now finally free to do whatever the heck you want, freaky or non-freaky, vanilla or non-vanilla, with your spouse. And I was just, before we were recording, Lynette and I were kind of talking about this because I've been thinking about it for quite a while in terms of just deconstructing some of the messages that I had learned about sex from church, so full transparency, and I think I've already shared this on the podcast, and I wasn't a virgin when I got married. And I remember thinking about, and the reason why I wasn't a virgin is because I was Catholic. Growing up, I was in a Catholic household, and we never talked about sex. And for me, like siblings, cousins, everybody was just doing it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a thing about, and even my parents never even talked about it at all. It was just kind of assumed that you're not supposed to do it, but they never talked about why or why not. And so coming into university, of course, I'm in university.
You're curious.
First year.
Yeah.
Residence. ... Yeah. You guys could finish the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I go to church. I started going to church, I think in my second year of uni. And then I remember this one experience that I had at youth church where there's this, I don't know if you've watched it. So what's her name? Juanita Bynum. Mm-hmm. She has this video called No More Sheets or something like that. Oh, wow. If you guys go on YouTube, check it out. It's very interesting. Some of my people from all nations at the time, they'll remember exactly what I'm talking about. Because it was a youth service. And they played this video of No More Sheets. And what's her name? Juanita Bynum. She went through this whole thing about, like, if you are not a virgin anymore, you are doomed. Like, life is over. You need to come and repent. And, like, my gosh. It was so intense. But, like, people, like, so at the end of the video, the youth pastor at the time called the people that are no longer virgins to come to the front and receive prayer and repentance. So imagine youth church, we're all like, not me, like go in front, but then we're all feeling convicted already, so we're just kind of like, we don't want to see, but you do. So we go in front and we receive prayer, and there's just this huge, for me, it was just a huge amount of shame, you know, shame and guilt and all these things, and then judgment too, because the people that were at the back that were still virgins were like, well, this doesn't apply to me. Mm-hmm.
Here I am with the golden trophy.
Hey. You know what I mean? So I'm fine. Meanwhile, some of them were doing things that they shouldn't be doing anyway, but that's a whole other story. So, you know, fast forward to when I'm getting ready to get married. You know, some of the comments were like, why would someone buy a book that they can just borrow? You know, in the sense that, like, in terms of like husband or a man comes and then they're sleeping with the girl, why would they marry her if they're already getting all the benefits and all these things? So there was always all this shame around it. And then there was also the other messaging where it's like, if you keep yourself for your husband, when you get married, you won't have any sexual problems, right? And it was kind of like, oh, so if you didn't keep yourself, then you were bound to have so many sexual problems. Like, you're doomed from the start, you know? So anyway, so the reason why I was thinking about this, because I wanted to kind of talk about these things to kind of dispel the myth, because a lot of women in Christian circles aren't actually virgins anymore. And it doesn't feel like there's talk around what does it actually mean to keep yourself, and messaging around it being for your husband is actually, even though it's a good thing for him, and technically he should also be keeping himself for his wife. Let's not even go there. You know what I mean? But I do think that there needs to be more complete messaging around, okay, so even if you are a virgin when you get married, it doesn't exclude you from the potential things that can happen in marriage. And then if you aren't a virgin, it doesn't mean that you're doomed for your whole marriage, but it just means that it's different. The experiences are different. You know what I mean? Yeah. Thoughts?
Man. So
heat has come out from my dress.
So I mean, for me, I get the messaging around, especially at church, in church, right? I mean, I didn't have too much, and I think I mentioned this on previous podcasts, that the messaging around sex was non-existent. Like from my parents, it was completely non-existent.
So how did you know that you had to keep yourself before marriage?
Church,
right.
So it wasn't. I don't even think that was the messaging I took. It was more so like, it was the sin aspect. For me, more so than I think it was recently, maybe a couple, I think even when I started All Nations, is when I really got that messaging of your husband part piece of it, but
before that, it was more about sin. Right.
It was more about, okay, if you engage in sex, then you are being sinful. If you engage in sex before marriage, then you are being sinful. So that was at the back of my mind all the time. I didn't go into marriage as a virgin, but I had one experience before that, and it was a horrible experience. And I think for me, I was just like, ooh, is this what sex is? And
I don't want it.
I don't want it. I don't want any of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't deter me from getting married or anything, but it was just like, I don't want to engage in it anymore until I get married, basically. So that was kind of like my thinking around it. So when it became save yourself for your marriage or save yourself for your husband, I think that the sinful aspect there was still there for me. It was like, I do not want to do or engage in sex before marriage because I want to get married first before I do. So I do agree though that the messaging is not complete, right? So yes, it is sinful, and Paul says it in Corinthians, right? Like if you are burning with desire, it's better than to get married and get it over with, basically. And same Corinthians also says like run from sexual immorality, like flee from sexual immorality. So with all those things, like the sinful aspect is there, right? And it's prevalent, and I think that should even be preached more, or should be talked more about than the save yourself for your husband. I think that aspect needs to be tweaked for sure.
So what would you say would be the pros for saving yourself, abstaining from sex before marriage?
I think also just knowing, I think one for me is just knowing that you're not sinning against God, right? I think I think that's the main thing for me. Like, you're not sinning against God in doing so, right? In engaging in sexual immorality or engaging in sex before marriage, right? Because for me, like I said, like that was the main thing for me. Like, it's sinful, and I do not want to engage in it before. And within the context of marriage, I mean, there's other things that you can say, okay, the cons come come out of there, because in marriage, because then you've waited and you haven't sinned, but yet, and we're gonna talk more about it, but you get into marriage and you're like, whoa,
what's all this?
Gotta figure it all out.
How come I didn't know?
Like, nobody really told us told you anything, like, or what to even expect, right? Because so that's a different aspect of it. But for me, I think the pro is mainly like, I haven't sinned against God. And I've obeyed his principle, and I got married, and yet now I am having that's the major one. Sex freely, right, without having the guilt
in the back
and then I think the experience I had, it was just the guilt was like so daunting for me that that I think to do it again was just going to be overwhelming for me.
It's interesting you talk about guilt, because even me, like, I didn't think about, I shouldn't be having sex before marriage, but it just didn't feel right. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like I shouldn't be doing this. Like, there was some sort of like ickiness to it. Whereas like in marriage, there's no ickiness to it. Like, sure, sex can be messy. There's ickiness in that, but like mentally speaking, like there's no like, I feel like am I performing or anything like that. And I think that's a pro to abstinence before marriage, is because I feel like when you, at least, because majority of people that have sex before marriage, they're in their teens, their 20s, because they're not married, right? And I think that in your teens and in your 20s, if you are engaging in sex, and this is for heterosexual couples only, especially for women, there is a tendency to want to perform, where it's like you're doing it for the guy. So you're doing all these things, and all these things is because you somehow saw it in porn, or the guy is telling you what he wants because he saw it in porn. And so you're doing all these things, but it's not you, and you're doing it for somebody else. And with that comes a lot of self-esteem issues,
right,
and confidence issues, right? Where it's like, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I not supposed to be doing this?
Am I doing it right?
Am I doing it right? Am I not? Oh, I saw it this way, so maybe I'm supposed to be doing it this way. And you're doing it all just to please the guy, but you're not even thinking about. And this is majority. Obviously, there's some girls. And, you know, maybe I'm old school, because nowadays some girls be out here being like, "Hey, I know exactly what I want. I'm using the guy for my needs."
Yes.
If that's you, okay. But when I was growing up many years ago, it was not like that. It was always about trying to please the guy. And I think that the pro to abstaining is that when you're finally married, there's a certain level of safety that you get from knowing that the person has actually married you and is with you not because
of what you can do, or
what you can do, or how you can perform, or how you can swing from wherever to do. Even though all those things are fine, but it's not going to be a judgment on what type of wife you are, what type of girlfriend you are, because there's a safety that comes in marriage. So I think that that's a pro.
I think another pro, as I'm thinking about it, is that I guess depending on who you marry and whether or not they also came in it with, like, you know, limited knowledge, is that you both get to figure it out together, right? Yeah. So there's no preconceived notions, or there's little preconceived notions about what it should be, but more is like you both are figuring it out together as to what you both want, and what pleases the both of you. And it can be a gradual process. It can be like a lot to figure out, especially at the beginning. But I think a pro would be like, okay, you may have had sex before, you know, last week, and it didn't go right, or it didn't go the way. You have a chance next week to work, or like in 2 days, a couple days to figure it out, right? To redeem yourself, to redeem yourselves to each other, right? Yeah. Like, so it's not, there's no pressure of like, oh, I didn't do it right, or like we both kind of messed up. Like, I mean, eventually you got there, but like, you know, the next couple of days you might be able to redeem yourselves, right? So you get that chance to do it, to gradually learn together, right? Because I think if you I think the challenge is when, I don't know about the men, but like a wife might be thinking, I need to have it all figured out. And if the man is coming in as well with like limited conceptions of what it should be, there's that pressure's taking off, right? Oh, I need to have it all figured out. Whereas he may also not have it figured out, right?
But I feel like, maybe this is me being pessimistic, but I think it's really rare in our day and age to find men that have not been exposed to sex. Not necessarily even just like the actual physically, but movies, porn. Like, there's so many images out there that in their minds they kind of figure like, this is how it has to look like. Women too, to be fair. So like, we still, and I think that's one of the downsides of our day and age, is that we are bombarded by so many different images of what sex is supposed to look like. And then we come into this union, and then we put pressure on each other to be like, but this is what I saw in porn. Why is it not looking like that now? Or it's like, for women, this is what I read in my erotic novels. Why is he not? You know,
Daniel Steele's.
Daniel Steele's Mills and Boone. What? I remember Mills and Boone. I'm not gonna expose her. I know someone. Jeez. That used to just read Mills and Boone. Like, I'm like, what are you reading? I'll not be reading it. I'm like, what? The guy's on a horse. He's riding on a horse with his hair flowing in the wind, and he's coming to come and deflower her. Like, what is this? This is not real. But we have all these like images in our heads, and then we bring that into our unions and try and see, that's the thing, that's the message that I don't think we talked about at church at all is the fact that, like, regardless of if you are a virgin, we've been bombarded by all these images that is going to make the situation itself complicated. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know any couple that has had a pretty straightforward sex life where it's been like they both have equal sex drives. They both want it all the time. They both like. I've never seen something like that. You know what I mean? And yeah, I don't talk to enough couples. If you're a couple that is like that, please tell us, because I want to know, how does it feel? Yeah. You know, you're both on the same page
every day, all day.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've no conflict, no nothing. I've never met someone like that. But like the image was like, or the message was, if you abstain, your life, your marriage, your sex life will just be blissful. And it's like that. No,
that messaging is off.
No, the other pro for abstaining, that I don't think a lot of people talk about is this concept of comparing, right? Like, if you have any kind of partners prior to, multiple, one, whatever, when you get married or when you're with a person, there is a chance that you could compare who you're with the people or person that you were with prior. And that's like, ugh, not fair.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not fair at all.
It's not.
But like anything, you have one child, you can't compare that child because you don't have any. You have your second child, chances are you're gonna compare. Oh, but this child used to do this. This one doesn't. We're just naturally predisposed to that. So just comparing because of experiences. So, and that can be dangerous because you're not fully enjoying who you're with because you're constantly thinking about
the next person,
the other person, or that person. Even if the other person was horrible and you're like, oh, thank God I'm with this person.
It's still comparing. Comparison,
you know?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a con.
Yeah.
What do you think about pros?
Oof. I mean,
are we even allowed to? I think that's the funny thing, right? Are we allowed to say pros to not? No, we said pros. What are the cons to abstaining?
The cons. So I mean, we're Christians.
Caveat, please. We're
Christians,
yes.
And we know better, and we know. I mean, we've talked about it. We've elaborated on the
we can say that this person told me, not that it's from us. We can say that person.
That would be a lie, blatant lie. But I could see.
Yes.
I could see some of
how.
the cons of not abstaining. You know, in that you, especially
the cons in abstaining.
The cons in abstaining. Oh yes. In that, especially if you're with the same partner. So I mean, you guys have lived together, you guys have dated, you've lived together. You're in a way testing what you're getting into, right? So you kind of already have an idea of who you're, what the dynamic is going to be like, when it comes to sex. Yeah. So I guess that because there's no surprises, right? Or if there's any surprise, like the both of you are making it up as you go. So in that you're thinking, okay, like I know this person, I know how they
you know what their package
their package is like.
So it's
not something that you have to gauge. You have to be gauging, you know? Oh, you don't know. You know? Me they're even like this is like an aside. Like even if it wasn't like sex or anything like that, especially when it came to the package, I'm finna ask questions. Okay? I asked the questions.
So what are you doing?
I asked the questions because I was like, I want to minimize the surprises.
I love it.
I want to minimize the surprises because I know I can't. I'm not gonna see or I can't see. But I want to at least have a range.
You lied. Well, it's too late now because we're married.
Damn it. Right?
Oh,
so
gosh.
I think you at least have an idea of, package you're getting into. So that could be a pro. That could be a con.
Yeah.
Abstaining.
No, pro. No, wait, I'm confused now.
No, a con.
A con to abstaining. Yes. Because if you abstain, then you won't know.
They won't know
until you now marry, and then you find out that is less than satisfactory.
The John is not joining.
It's not joining. So then what do you do?
What do you do? You just stick it out, man.
But you see, that's like, and somebody could say that, oh, but if you hadn't had sex before, then how would you know if it's not guaning? You know what I mean? Like but it's like, I think physically, I feel like you would know.
You can see. Some people be brushing themselves again. You can. I mean, I don't know. You can't have more of an idea than what the person will tell you. Yeah. Or what you assume. Because you haven't seen it. Yeah. You haven't seen it in action too.
You haven't seen it.
Because you can see it, but it's not in action, so you don't really know.
Yeah, because
it needs to be in action too in order to.
Oh my goodness, look at you, hilarious. It has to be in action.
It has to be in action to see what you're dealing with.
I
as opposed to if it's not
normal,
what is
like
it?
This fat cat doesn't tell you anything.
It tells you nothing.
No.
Okay. So
I hope that you guys can understand our codes that we're using here.
Yeah. Just reading between the lines because I'm making signs.
If you can't see our video, we're using our hands to determine length of things. Yes, it's very important.
No, it's very important, right? Yeah. But I think you won't know that if you abstain. Yeah, you just pray.
Yeah, I just hope. And then if it's not guaning, then you have to take the bold steps to now try to adapt to what you have. Yes,
right. I don't know. I've seen videos where some men are giving advices as to how to
make it bigger.
Yeah. So I guess you seek out.
You have to use different motions. I don't know, man. So that's definitely
a
con.
One.
Yeah.
Right? So
I would think also. I think that I was listening to this and I don't know how I feel about this concept, but it's like people say that you need to know your body, right? Because you need to know what you like, what you don't like, in order to tell your partner what you like and what you don't like, so that your sex can be enjoyable. Because if you don't know what you like or don't like, how will your partner be able to know what you like and don't like? And I'm like, I guess the reason why I struggle with that, because it's implying that you need to be able to masturbate and do all these things in order to now then tell your partner, okay, and I guess it's depending on which church you go to. Masturbation is either good or bad. Because there's some churches that they'll be like, yeah, you should masturbate so you can know yourself. It's not sinful, blah blah blah. Because you're not sinning.
You're not actually doing the act of somebody else.
Yeah, but then it's kind of like, but aren't you lusting in your head? So
yeah,
that in and of itself. So that's why there are two bodies to it. It's like there's some churches that are like, masturbation's fine, and others are like, actually it's not. So it's like, so if depending on which school you fall into, if you fall into the masturbation is fine, then the con to abstaining is the fact that you're not going to get to know your body or that of your partner before you get into marriage. But then, am I making sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. And then even then, so now you are married. Like even like for example, your honeymoon. I remember hearing a story about both of them were virgin. It was the worst experience of their lives.
I know. I have friends who had to go to counseling.
Wow. Yeah, because they just didn't know what to do.
No clue what to do.
Or they're just like, it was painful, or like, but then having those conversations, like I feel like, so for example, was it your bridal shower that I got lube? It was yours.
Yeah, that you gave me lube.
Yeah, and I was
the
like,
best gift.
I'm like,
just by the way, lube.
But you know, some people are against lube because
they'll bring you lingerie, not knowing what to do with the lingerie.
No, but then they'll say they'll bring lube and then they're like, oh, I'm adding something to my marriage and I don't want to add things because it might. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I'm like, so you're always ready to go all the time, and it's
dry.
Dry, like
dry.
Especially if
you will die.
You want to die? You want to walk in pain the next day? Not even the next day.
Feel like
hours later.
Pepper.
Oh, I've heard that, and I've been like, that. You see that like everybody has their own thing. Like, oh, I don't know the parameters around what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do in their marriage. And then it's like, if they bring lube, it's like, what's to stop you from bringing a toy and blah blah blah.
Who determines all of the? I don't know. Who determines all of these
things? Yeah,
parameters, right?
But it's like it. But people, at some woman at church, what did she say? It has to do with oral sex. She said that the Holy Spirit told her not to have oral sex, so therefore she thinks that it applies to everybody. So she was now telling people not to have oral sex, and it's kind of like, what? Where does it say explicitly, "Thou shalt not"? Suck the penis of your husband. You know what I mean? I'm using biblical language because clearly it didn't say it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where does it say that? It doesn't say that anywhere. So now, if the Holy Spirit, and I don't discount her experience with what the Holy Spirit told her, because everybody's conviction is different. Maybe there was something that was coming up while that was happening that was not pleasing God in a way, and the Holy Spirit had to convict you. Fine, but why does that then apply to everybody? You know what I mean? And so now when we hear all these messaging about don't do this, don't do this. For example, this one pastor was saying, oh, I don't hit my wife from the back because she's like a prostitute, so you shouldn't be doing it. But it's because in his past he was sleeping with prostitutes, and that's how he was having sex with prostitutes.
So then that's his conviction.
So that's his conviction. In order for his wife to not be a prostitute, or not prostitute, in order for him to not see his wife as a prostitute, he's not going to do that position.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everybody now should now, or like this other person that was saying that as a man you should only do missionary because how can you are the head of the household? How can your wife be on top? Therefore, as the head of the household, you must always be on top. What? How you go? But you see what I'm saying?
I don't mess people up.
Now the wife, it's like he's messing all the wives. Now the wives are like,
oh no.
Why? Why are you doing this?
Oh, that pastor. Why are you doing this?
Why are you doing this one? Why? So you see what I'm saying? So it's like,
no, I get
all these things, you know? So
yeah. I mean, I think everybody has, again, like you said, like everybody has their convictions as to like what they want to introduce within, you know, their relationship and their marriage. And I think both of them should be on the same page about what it is they want to introduce into their marriage. I don't know. Nobody knows people's bedrooms. Nobody goes into people's bedrooms. Shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So, like, for you to kind of bog down something that they haven't had their own convictions about, and is working for their marriage, right? I mean, it's tricky because like every couple has their thing, right? So it's very tricky to blanket statement a lot of things, right? And I think that's what we should be really cautious about. Just like throwing a thick blanket on everything, just be like, you must not, like you should not, right? My therapist was talking to me about being very cognizant about your shoulds and your musts, because if you do, when you say you should or you must not, or you should or you must, it's like it's an obligation for you to do it. It doesn't give you agency, it doesn't give you choice to be like, I am choosing to do XYZ. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think if especially people of authority, when they blanket statement something, and sometimes it's not necessarily from the Word of God. It's not necessarily. It's an opinion that they have, right? And it's their own conviction that they have. And then it's like, you must not.
Yeah.
Okay, but why? Like, give me more context as to why.
Yeah.
I think the contexts are missing in a lot of these conversations, right? Like, where is it stemming from? Where is it coming from? And some of them seem very abstract because it's like just taken out of context and it's just said, without giving us like, a timeline as to how we got there, right? And in God's word, everything is in context, right? If you read the full picture of God's word, everything is in context. Everything that the writers wrote is in context. And taking it out of that context needs more explanation. I think that that's not often done with some of the messages that we receive. It almost, and I'm not comparing it to some of the myths that we hear even in African homes, like, oh, don't, at least in Ghana they would say, oh, don't sing at night because your mother will die or something.
Gosh,
like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So just like, but it was because of something that they said, oh, because they don't want soap to get in your mouth, basically. Yeah. You're taking a bath, you have soap on your face, they don't want it to get in your mouth, so stop. So they tell you this grand thing, so that this thing that seems really small can be prevented. Yeah. Right? But like, and I feel like we do that with a lot of the messaging at church. We say this grand thing without actually explaining where it's coming from.
Like, what's the context behind
it. So I think we should be really careful when it comes to things that are affecting real people's lives, right? And we've talked about this before, marriage counseling having to be all encompassing. I know one can't know everything. There's certain things that you go into that you just kind of have to figure out. Like marriage is one of them, motherhood is one of them, parenting is one of them. Like, you just have to figure out, because there's no script, there's no manual to it. But I think something like marriage counseling, especially within the Christian context, should be all rounded. It should be all encompassing. I'm a big believer that it should be. Because one person doesn't have all that corporate knowledge, doesn't make sense, right? For one person to be like, this is what marriage is, and that's it. So having people, maybe perhaps a panel, of the pastors on it, and the person who has who has been married for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and XYZ to be on that panel, so that they can have different perspective, right? Because I feel like back home, like in Ghana, the marriage counseling is 6 months. It's a long 6 months. It's a long time. They take time with the husband to talk with him, and they take time with the wife, and then they take you together. So that you have a full, well-rounded conversation when you're going into it. And I personally didn't hear about sex, especially like within the church that we were going to, much about it until I think a mutual friend of ours, was saying like they found it very challenging when it came to like sex. They were both virgin, and went to the point where they had to go to like the library, because at that time internet wasn't like a big thing. Library to get Kama Sutra or all of this, just to kind of see what they were even dealing with, right? Because the conversation wasn't had, and it was just it may have just been boxed into a something pretty with a bow on top. But then when
the rubber hits the road,
literally,
you're like
which hole does it? Which hole?
Wrong one.
Wrong hole.
Is it supposed to feel this way?
This hole is not it. Get it out.
And I'm pretty sure it's not that. It's not that.
I'm pretty sure it's not it, right?
No, you're right.
So I think if we're going to have these conversations, I think it should be full, with depth.
And without shame too.
Without shame,
right? Because
what is up with the shame?
We're all trying to figure it out,
And if you're Christian, you're married, like, we're all having sex. Like, I hope we are.
I hope we are.
Yeah, we should be able to have these conversations without the shame attached to it, because some people are like really struggling and finding these notes like.
But there's also shame involved in it, because it's like culture has also, and that's probably why I started it. Was it this recording when I was like, sex is a beautiful thing. It's made by God. Yeah. But like obviously the enemy has come to pervert it, and so we all somehow have had a perverted image of what sex is. And it's like now it comes to unlearning that and then relearning the true purpose for it, which is what God had created it for, binding two people together, unity and all these kind of things. But that shame comes from the fact that like, shh, don't talk about this. Like, oh, it's only in the bedroom, this, or things like that. So, and I think that's also the con to abstaining, is the fact that because people are abstaining, they're not talking about it, like the reality of it, like, okay, it hurts, but like all the time, or just sometimes, or just once,
and why does it hurt?
Or things
going back
like
to our lube
conversation, right?
Get lube. Get yourself one. If you don't have one, get one.
And even to dispel the myth, like some people will say that they don't want to use lube because the man feels like he should be able to get his wife wet, right? So it's almost like a fault on the man that he's not doing enough foreplay.
Sometimes you just feel sleepy.
You're sleepy, or you're just dry. Like some people are just dry.
Your hormones.
Yeah, hormones. Those dang hormones. And so it has nothing to do with the guy.
The man,
it just has to do, right? But then again, education, because now it's like if you're abstaining, sometimes they'd be like, you shouldn't hear. I can't remember who it was, but somebody's like, if you're not having sex, you shouldn't even be talking about it. Like I remember, oh my goodness, who was? I'm maybe gonna say the person's name here, but the person was like, if you're single, you shouldn't even be talking about sex. And it's like, but
how do you go from single
to all of a sudden
marriage? To all of a sudden, I know how to have
sex. And then the expectation that you know nothing about it, don't talk about it, don't do anything. The minute you say I do, you should be some sort of freak in the sheets. Like all of a sudden, you should be doing it all the time, every house. Like,
and then you come back to that same person to have counseling about why you're not having it.
Yeah, and it's like, but
and then they'll be like,
why you should be doing it all the time. And it's like, but where the transition between I can't think about it, I can't talk about it. If I think about it, talk about it, it's also sin, right? Because now we're taught, you're having lustful thoughts, you're this. But then God created us as sexual beings, so chances are we are going to think about it. But it's about reframing how you think about it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and not all of a sudden you're thinking about it. All of a sudden you're like, I'm gonna just go on porn because I'm like,
I just want to know.
I just want to know exactly. So reframing that and having spaces where people can be like, I know I'm not supposed to be having sex, but I am quite horny. What do I do? Right, exactly.
Or I know I'm in a good relationship with the man who wants to also abstain, but when we're together,
it's hot. As it should be.
What?
Because if you're going to marry this guy, you do have to be physically attracted to him. So if you're there with him and you're not feeling any jiggly in your body,
you may not be having to go into that marriage.
Oh no. Because in the marriage, it will just not even show up.
Before marriage, you're showing yourself the best versions of yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling some type of way, when
you have the best version,
when you're married and they're walking around with bonnet,
you just don't even want to. You'll just be like, put that away. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness. As we're talking, I'm just feeling sad because I'm feeling for people that like they marry someone that they're not physically attracted to, or they've shut that down so much because they just feel like the minute you feel any kind of sexual whatever in your body, you're automatically thinking that you're sinning. So you're conditioning your mind to not feel to suppress it. And then somehow you get married. Maybe there's a spiritual thing that happens. I don't know. Somebody let us know if this is your experience. All of a sudden you get married and then the freak has been unleashed somehow. I don't know.
This reminds me of the video where Kim on stage said, like, you have to pray before having sex, and she's like, shut up, I was so near. I've been praying. Because maybe that's where the freaking you is it will come out, because
we'll try that today.
We'll try.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, you see what I mean? So like even that, like I wanted to talk about that, like that transition between not completely shutting down any kind of physical feeling, any sexual feeling that you feel in your body, which is natural because we are sexual beings, and at some point our bodies have to respond that way, especially if we are attracted to whoever it is. So you shut that down, all of a sudden you get married, and then the expectation is that the floodgates will be open, but then even when the floodgates now, because this happened to me, like I wasn't a virgin, but like the messaging at one point in my head was like, yeah, I'm feeling sexual, God please forgive me because I'm feeling sexual, God please forgive me, you know what I mean? Then I finally got married and I'm like, oh. And so for a while I was like, oh, this is great, but then like
the devil will be adding fear,
and then
human beings
will
be adding fear.
Will be adding fear.
Christians that are supposed.
So like for me, like I got to a point where it's like, I'm having sex with my husband. Like why should I be feeling like some type of way, like I'm still doing something wrong? You know what I mean? And it's not a secret. Like I had a conversation with him before where it's like, I shouldn't be feeling like I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. But why do I feel like that sometimes? You know what I mean? And it boils back down to the messaging prior, where it's like any kind of feeling I'm supposed to have, shut it down. Yeah. You know,
the purity era.
The purity era. Yeah. Yeah.
You must stay pure. Everything that you're thinking.
Pull down any stronghold. Any thoughts, hold it captive. Any sexual thoughts. Oh my goodness. You know, so there definitely has to be re-messaging around how you, like how are we teaching sex to the younger generation for them to understand that it's holy, it's good, these feelings are normal, but then they all need to be held within a context, like having these two things in tandem, you know, because we're always taught that, oh, these feelings, hey, put them aside, and then the context is like later, and then boom,
when later comes, you can't actually even go back to the same people that said put it away, because then I don't know, it could be also be like they also don't know how to talk about it, right? Like in full disclosure here, like I think my willingness to talk more about sex came from having conversations with you, right? It was also for me, it was also very hush hush, like, you know, don't really talk about it kind of thing. But when I heard how you openly talk about, you know, things like sex and, you know, other topics, I was like, it's so freeing. Like it was just so freeing to me that I was like, you know what? I want to also like be able to talk about it freely like that, because it's something that we are sexual beings. We all think about. You know, we all think about it too, right? Let's just be honest. We all think about it. Yeah. Right? Whether you're married, whether you're not, like you all think about it. And I think that it just needs a fuller messaging. You know, I think pieces of it, a lot of the pieces are missing. Right? And then it boils down to just like a singular piece or a couple of single pieces here and there that are being talked about and not fully all encompassing. Right? And then we leave people out in the woods to just figure themselves out. Like, you know, if anybody has any kind of conversations that they, you know, this burning and they wanna talk about, like Z and I are here, like, you know, reach out, let's chat about them, because if you're having those questions, the most likely other people are also having them, right? You're not alone. Exactly. Right? So just feeling like the isolation of like, oh, it's just me, or I'm sinful, or I'm being very sinful. And the enemy will also play on that so much that it will now be like you fall. It can even push you into falling even faster. right?
Yeah.
So let's
because
chat.
you'll obsess over
because
the
you
thought.
obsess over the thought so much that you're like, this thing again, like what even is it, you know? So let's chat. Like it's like we're open to talk about them, like talk about the sex all the time.
Probably not on the pod. And funny enough, the sex is probably the topics that we've talked about that people listen to the most.
So it tells you something.
It tells you something,
that people are thinking about it. You know. So yeah.
Great chat. I love this. I was laughing so much, my stomach. Oh my god. It's great.
Oh gosh, it's great. Like,
well, until next time, guys. Bye.